This is MTG Burgeoning, and in this video we are going to update and upgrade our Jenson Carthalion Druid Exile WUBRG specific EDH deck. Thank you for joining us for another installment of the Up and Up series. Today we are updating and upgrading Jenson Carthalion Druid Exile. This is our WUBRG-centric deck, and down in the description of this video, you'll find a link to this build's deck tech. You'll also find a link to this build's deck list, and of course there will be a link to this build's video primer series. We've got just 3 cards going in today, which means 3 cards are coming out. And we're going to utilize the space in this video to, how should we say, we're looking to increase and optimize the card advantage in this deck. That's the theme of this video. We've got a few cards going in that are going to help with that today, and we're going to take out some cards that are just not cutting it in the 99. All right, with that in mind, the first card that's going in, it is Up the Beanstalk. Here we have an enchantment with just a mana value of 1 and a green, and when it comes into play, and whenever we cast a spell with mana value 5 or greater, we draw a card. Just the fact that we can draw a card with a mono green spell by investing 1 and a green mana and it comes into play, that's a pretty good return if it's mono green by itself. Of course, it being an enchantment, it's going to have a little more staying power on the battlefield. We don't have to worry about creature or artifact removal, and how many people are looking to specifically remove enchantments from our side of the battlefield. Remember, this is a WUBRG specific deck, so we're looking to cast many spells that are at least 5 mana. That's white, blue, black, red, and green. And each time we do, Up the Beanstalk is going to put 1 card into our hand. It also, like I said, it's going to put a card in our hand when it comes into play. And whenever we cast one of those WUBRG spells, or WUBRG Plus, because there are a number of our WUBRG spells that are like 1 in WUBRG colors or 2 in WUBRG colors, that's going to trigger Up the Beanstalk and it's going to put more cards into our hand. That card is going to be an absolute workhorse in this deck, and I'm looking forward to game testing that theory. With Up the Beanstalk going in, the card it's going to replace is Conqueror's Flail. This is an equipment for 2 mana to cast and 2 mana to equip. It gave equip creature +1/+1 for each color among permanents we control. It is not difficult at all for this to give one of our creatures +5/+5 because we are a WUBRG specific deck. It's not going to be difficult at all to have a WUBRG permanent on our side of the battlefield. So for 2 generic mana, this gives one of our creatures +5/+5, and as long as Conqueror's Flail is attached to a creature, our opponents cannot cast spells during our turn. That is a nice defensive wall of text for Conqueror's Flail. But aside from that layer of protection, the +5/+5 is just for 1 creature. We have many creatures in this deck that help to give our creatures bigger power and toughness and keyword abilities like Knight of the Reliquary and Scion of Draco. Those 2 creatures, when they're on our side of the battlefield, they affect our entire team, where Conqueror's Flail only gets to 1 creature. Yes, that layer of security is nice, but it may not be as necessary when we're sporting such a powerful array of creatures on our side of the battlefield in our hand, potentially from our graveyard. So I think what we can do here is we can sacrifice the Conqueror's Flail, its layer of protection, its 1 creature boosting power and toughness, and we can take that out for the massive amount of card advantage we can get from Up the Beanstalk. Because even if we do lose the layer of protection, and maybe we get a creature here picked off here, picked off there through an instant spell, we will still come up in the black on that exchange because of all the cards we could draw from Up the Beanstalk. Plus, the mana value is the same at 2. I think that our mono green enchantment on the right is going to have a greater impact on the game than the Conqueror's Flail will on the left. Of course, gameplay will test out that theory. All right, card number 2 going into the 99 of our WUBRG deck. It is Rogue's Gallery. Here we have a sorcery. It's mono black. It's 2 and a black mana. And for each color, we return up to 1 target creature card of that color from our graveyard to our hand. The best we can do here in this deck is get 5 creatures back from our graveyard to our hand for just 2 and 1 black mana. Now, this is better for us because Jenson is only going to trigger when we cast our multicolor spell, not when they come into the battlefield. So cards like Living Death, maybe a more neutered down Patriarch's Bidding, cards like that where they get the creatures back from the graveyard onto the battlefield, as powerful as that is, that's not going to help us to trigger Jenson, letting us scry and create those Serra Angel creature tokens. So for the investment of just 2 and a black mana, we're going to get upwards to 5 different creatures from our graveyard right to our hand. Keep that in mind. 3 mana, 5 creatures from our graveyard to our hand. That is an amazing return for some card advantage investment. We do take a slight hit because, let's face it, this is not a multicolored spell. This is just a mono black spell. It will do nothing to trigger Jenson. But indirectly, it will have a huge help of getting those cards into our hand so that we can cast them, trigger Jenson, flood our side of the battlefield with those Serra Angel tokens, and manipulate the top of our library. With Rogue's Gallery going in, we wanted to identify a card that had a similar effect, a similar ability, and just make sure that the swap is going to come out better for us. And I think it will, and I think you'll agree with me when we say that Rogue's Gallery in this build is going to be better than All Sun's Dawn. All Sun's Dawn is a sorcery. It's a mono-color sorcery. It's 4 and a green versus the 2 and a black of Rogue's Gallery. So for each color, we return up to 1 target card of that color from our graveyard to our hand, and then we exile All Sun's Dawn. So a couple things here. Yes, All Sun's Dawn would allow us to get back some enchantments or maybe an instant or a sorcery, because it's just looking for any card of a color, where Rogue's Gallery is looking for those creatures. For us, we're winning the game with our creatures. We don't have a ton of instants and sorcery spells that are going to win us the game. It's going to be our creatures. So we're going to sacrifice the ability to get any card back, any non-land card, I should say. It has to have a color, of course. We're going to sacrifice that ability, the flexibility of what All Sun's Dawn gives us, and then we're going to replace that with making sure that we can get upwards to 5 creatures back to our hand with Rogue's Gallery, with a 40% discount on the overall mana investment. In the long run, I do suspect that Rogue's Gallery is going to have a bigger impact for us than All Sun's Dawn. Plus, we have to exile All Sun's Dawn, which means there's no chance for us to use it again, where the chances are slim, but it is possible for us to use Rogue's Gallery more than once during a game. We're going to see again with gameplay testing, but I'm pretty sure that that's going to be an amazing swap for us, especially when it comes to getting that card advantage and making sure that we can keep casting those creature spells and triggering Jenson. All right, we got one more card going in today. We're going to talk about card advantage. This one is going to be an absolute stud. Going in for our third and final card in this video, it is Omnath, Locus of All. Here we have a 4/4 legendary Phyrexian Elemental, and it does have that WUBRG. We got a white, a blue, a black Phyrexian mana, a red, and a green. If we would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes black instead. That is going to be a feature that is going to be very helpful if you really scan and study the 99 of this build. We have several permanents that, under the best conditions, we can tap and add 5 mana to our mana pool. If for some reason we don't have anywhere to put that mana and we're at the end of our last opponent's turn, then we can tap all that mana. It'll save. Because of Omnath, it'll all turn black, but we will be able to use that mana for perhaps, the generic mana cost of some of our other spells to use to jam into Jenson Carthalion, we don't lose it. It just becomes black. So it's just building up. We can use it in Jenson. We can use it for some of our other generic mana costs. Let's not overlook that, because if we're stuck with trying to cast some spells because maybe we're just looking for some more card advantage, generating this type of mana battery that just grows and grows and grows, even though it's just one color, we can find a lot of uses for that mana as the game moves on. That's just the first ability that this version of Omnath has. At the beginning of our pre-combat main phase, we look at the top card of our library. We may reveal that card if it has 3 or more colored mana symbols in its mana cost. 3 or more colored mana symbols, that's going to be the majority of this deck. That's going to be all of our WUBRG spells, in addition to some other spells in this build that are purposely put in there because they have 3 colors, because they have 3 mana symbols in their mana values. Supreme Verdict, Time Wipe, Temur Ascendancy, those are just 3 that come off the top of my head. So there are going to be a lot of ways in which to trigger the second ability with Omnath, because if we do end up revealing a card that has 3 or more colored mana symbols, we then add 3 mana in any combination of its colors and then put it into our hand. And if we don't reveal it, we still put it into our hand. So Omnath, just with its presence on the battlefield, gives us the ability to convert unused mana into black mana that we don't lose. It just stores up like a mana battery. And with its presence on the battlefield, it puts a card into our hand at the beginning of each of our pre-combat main phases. And if we so choose to reveal it because it has at least 3 colored mana symbols, then we're going to get 3 more mana to put either onto Omnath, which will then become black mana and saved up, or use it to cast some of our spells. So strong, so much work. This version of Omnath is going to be absolutely ridiculous in this deck, and I cannot wait to get that Phyrexian Elemental onto the battlefield. With Omnath Locus of All going in, it's going to replace a card that, from a distance and up close, is questionable as to why it was put into this deck to begin with. We have an entire deck that's sculpted around casting WUBRG spells. The majority of our spells in this deck are white, blue, black, red, green, and then that's it. Yes, we have some spells that are 1 generic mana and WUBRG, 2 generic mana and WUBRG. Maybe we've got double WUBRG or something like that. But the majority of the spells are just looking for us to tap a white, a blue, a black, a red, and a green and cast that spell. So if that's the case, then why, in the beginning process of creating this deck, did we include Jodah, Archmage Eternal? 4/3 Human Wizard, 1 in Jeskai colors, Jodah flies, and we may pay WUBRG mana rather than pay the mana cost for spells that we cast. That seems to be a little redundant, if you ask me. I don't know if just at the very beginning of constructing this deck that there were a lot of other non-WUBRG-y spells that were more than just the 5 red mana. I know Progenitus is in the 99 of this build, but I can't fathom that there are many more WUBRG 1 or WUBRG 2 plus spells that really is going to benefit from keeping Jodah in the 99 and keeping cards like Omnath Locus of All out. So with the resounding slam dunk of approval, Omnath version 5.0 is going to trump and just slam dunk right over Jodah, and it's not even difficult to make that swap. Of these 3 changes, I would say the first one might be the toughest one to get by in having Conqueror's Flail and its level of security leave the 99 of this build. Again, we're going to see how that works. I do think over the long haul, in a vacuum, that the card advantage that Up the Beanstalk is going to give us is going to offset, like I said, losing an instant removal spell here or there, some of the permanents on our side of the battlefield. We'll be able to get more cards into our hand with Up the Beanstalk. And I mean, let's face it, this deck is not a combo deck at this time, but we're not looking to win out on one turn. We're just going to make sure that our side of the battlefield is so much stronger and powerful than any of our opponents that the best thing that they could do would be to cast a mass board wipe, which Conqueror's Flail is not going to prevent, especially if it's sorcery speed. If it were an instant like Fated Retribution, then yeah, Conqueror's Flail being attached to one of our creatures would help to stop that. but we're not really seeing much of that in gameplay. And with respect to the other two swaps, those are easier than Sunday morning in my book. But of course, you're the MTGBC. You'll let me know in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.